Welcome back to Movie Guys Improvise. You are listening to
Chill with Realms,
Jurassic Mark,
and Faerhad Targaryen. Last week, we talked about Captain America Civil War, one of the most overrated movies of all time. For this week, we wanted to take it back again and talk about a movie based on an anime from back in the 2000s, Digimon the Movie. Realms, this movie was your choice. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the movie is and why you chose this as today's episode?
Alright, so we start off with our familiar friends from the Digimon series, and they are attacked by a virus. And I'll keep it short and sweet. The virus is a little bit out of control. Tai is doing everything he can to try to get, all the original Digi-Destins together, and he's having a little bit of issue with that. But essentially, as all, anime and movies go, they figure it out, but it's interesting to see how it happens.
Definitely, yeah. So I remember being a kid and being super excited for this movie. In fact, I remember being a kid and having like all of my best friends be into Pokemon. It was like Pokemon this and Pokemon that. Like Digimon was like a microcosm to the macrocosm that was Pokemon. Like the popularity of Digimon, the anime, the video games, even the card game, right, was a fraction of the popularity of Pokemon. In fact, I would go so far as to say Pokemon is probably one of the biggest influential IPs of our generation going into this generation.
Yeah, I definitely came into the world of Pokemon before I even branched into Digimon. I felt like they were a little bit underrated, but at the same time, there were some games that they came out with at that time that I felt if they had done it a little bit different, then it would have fit my taste so much more.
I was into Pokemon, definitely, and I never actually get around to watching the show, so when we get into our thoughts about the movie, that's definitely going to influence my perspective. Thank God my wife was there because she did watch the show, so she sort of coached me through the movie. But yeah, I remember when Pokemon was huge, and yeah, Digimon, I remember it being somewhat popular, but it wasn't as omnipresent, to be sure.
I was going to say, remember when everybody wanted a Digivice?
I would still love a Digivice. But yeah, I remember when everybody still wanted Digivices, and the general shape and size of the Digivices have changed throughout the animes. But in terms of comparing the two, Digimon and Pokemon, I think the easy way or the most common way to look at Digimon back in the day, and maybe even to this day, is that it was just a big, huge ripoff of Pokemon. And while it was popular, it never stuck like the ground the way Pokemon has. Like Pokemon is still, to this day, probably one of the most popular IPs. I don't know if you gentlemen remember back in 2016, there was this mobile game that came out called Pokemon Go, and everybody was crazy about it. Like people were taking flights to different countries just to catch Pokemon in those countries. That's how serious it got.
Oh, I met people who got, zoo memberships because you could catch special Pokemon there. So they were, ignoring real animals to catch, digital ones on this phone game.
It was starting to feel like that was the closest thing that we'll ever see to world peace.
Too bad that that's the closest we got, and we can never, bring that back in terms of, how peaceful conceptually it could have been. But
we're going to need real Pokemon in the world for it to really happen.
There we go. Or Digimon.
Yeah, send them to the UN.
I have a list of Digimon that I would have loved to have in real life as well, because I just know Digimon better than Pokemon. But that's just me. For this movie, I just remember being a kid and being so excited for this movie. And I think by the time Digimon the Movie came out, there may have already been at least 2 theatrical Pokemon movies that had released. I don't know how many by then, but there was at least 1 or 2. And I think it was called I don't know if it was called Pokemon the Movie or something. But
there
yeah.
was Pokemon the first movie, I remember, which that's a pretty presumptuous title when you think about it, but I digress. It's don't worry, this is just the first one.
No, you're right. Yeah, I do remember actually that the title had something presumptuous. So yeah, Pokemon the first movie sounds just about right. So Digimon the movie is actually a compilation of three different anime movies that were edited to be one. So the first 20 minutes of the movie is called Digimon Adventure. The middle 40 minutes is called Digimon Adventure Children's War Game or Our War Game, which for me, and we'll get into this later, was my favorite like movie of the three movies. And the last one is called Digimon Adventure 2, Digimon Hurricane Landing, Transcendent Evolution, The Golden Digimental. So I did a bit of reading, and it turns out that the final product in Digimon the movie, the amount of editing they did to each of these makes it almost a separate story from, well, kind of a separate story from the original like Japanese versions of these movies. The first 20 minutes, which introduces Tai and Kari to their first Digi Egg, not only was that just people's, I guess, introductions to Digimon the movie, but that's also an introduction that was also the prequel story of Digimon the anime. I'm not sure if either of you gentlemen ever watched Digimon the anime.
I watched a lot of the first season and second season.
Awesome.
Yeah, I didn't see any of it.
No worries.
I saw like.
Go ahead.
I think I saw like Greymon toys at like Toys R Us, and that was about it.
I can't remember if I dabbled too much into the third season.
The third season really switched things up. It was a completely different universe, and Digimon Adventure, the anime, was apparently an actual anime in the universe of the third season of Digimon. So here's another interesting thing. While I was listening to Kari narrate, it was interesting to me, like listening to her, like give us the narration and let us know what's going on with the exposition of the digital world and everything. And I have to kind of look at it two ways, because obviously the last time I watched this, I was like 12 years old. And I'm watching this now, like so many years later, and I'm watching it from a completely different lens. Because a lot of the time, children's movies that are released are also movies that like grown-ups can kind of enjoy. And I was wondering while watching this if I'm gonna get the vibe that this is a movie that like grown-ups can also enjoy, or if it was made specifically and only for children to enjoy. And I feel like now that I've watched it, it kind of goes both ways for me, and I'll explain. The first thing I will say though, like right from the beginning of the movie, there was that other cartoon, Angela Anaconda, and I remember like that cartoon being like shown on Fox Kids, and the art style was unique, but I never really got into that show. Don't know if either of you did, but I thought it was just cool how they integrated another cartoon to kind of hype up Digimon the movie. And then the movie starts with the Digi-Rap song. And I remember hearing that Digi-Rap song like the first time I watched the movie, and I thought it was cool. And eventually, as I got older, I started really getting into rap music. Like, remember Realms when I was a huge Tupac fan in high school and stuff. And
yes, sir.
I remember hearing the Digi-Rap song the first time I watched this movie, and I thought it was cool, but honestly, I don't even think I knew what rap music was back then. I just thought that was a cool song that they had for the movie.
It's definitely a cool song, but we've definitely heard a lot of more advanced lyricism in our time now.
We definitely have. Yeah, that was written specifically to fit with Digimon, yeah. Pretty sure Dragon Ball GT also had a rap song for its like intro theme, I think.
I think so too. I'm trying to remember it.
Now, going back to Digimon, I picked up on some things that I didn't pick up on the first time I watched the movie, which this part of it, like I guess the dialogue, is sometimes what makes me feel like this movie was made for like grown-ups to also enjoy it alongside children. And that's because of the dialogue. I remember when Tai was commenting the next morning after Kari was like, she had the Digi Egg on her lap, and Tai said something like, "We can tell all our friends that our apartment is on top of a nuclear waste dump, and that's why the egg looks like that." The Digi Egg hatches eventually, and then we have the baby Digimon that digivolves to Koromon, which then digivolves to Agumon. And this is one thing that's sort of confusing to me. This Agumon was huge. If you guys watched the anime, you know that Tai's Agumon is not that huge of an Agumon. And he sounds really mean too. This Agumon not only was bigger, but he sounded really mean. So I have a theory, and I can't back this up, but sometimes Digimon of the same species will be different types, and by type I mean there are 3 different attributes to a Digimon. Digimon can be data, they can be virus, or they can be vaccine. Sometimes there are also free spirit Digimon, and we'll get back to that once we get into the second segment of the movie. But for this first segment, I think this Agumon might have been a virus type Digimon. But I can't be too sure. I'm only saying that because he seemed a lot meaner than Tai's Agumon, and he was a lot bigger. Same thing with the Greymon. But before I even get to that, I will say one thing that was kind of iffy to me was how the streets of whichever town they were in, that huge metropolis, was totally and completely empty. Now, there was one episode of the Digimon anime where Tai was able to go back to the real world, and he saw Ogremon, but it seemed like nobody else was reacting to him, and only Tai was. I wonder if that's what this movie was showing as well, that like only these specific kids are able to see the Digimon and not react so much, but that part I didn't really get. Like why the streets were so empty. There was that one time where a truck was driving down the street. The passenger says, "Did you see that?" And the driver says, "No, I was sleeping." "But you're driving," is what the passenger says.
Yeah, I remember
that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I remember that the first time I watched it, and that was probably one of the funniest parts in the first segment of the movie. But besides that, I didn't get how, like, the city was basically empty when this fight was going on.
Yeah, I never really understood that. Like, I know at one point in the story, Kari says, you know, they later find out that all of the kids that saw the events, they became the Digi-Destined.
Yes.
But they don't really, as far as I've seen, explain how all that can happen and nobody else noticed it.
Exactly, yeah. I didn't really get that either. But yeah, that movie, the 20-minute segment, was just the prequel to the actual anime. They decided to, Kari's narration made it sound like Willis had a big part to do with it, because she was saying how at the same time Willis was getting his first Digi-Egg. But whether or not like this was Digimon the Movie that has Willis as like a new character, this 20-minute segment is still like relevant to the actual Digi-Destined story. But because this movie is structured the way it is, it's not really like a traditional movie where you have a first act and a second act and a third act. This Digimon the Movie is made up of 3 different movies, and I feel like you can also say each segment of the movie also has its own first, second, and third acts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think like part 1 was really more like just an introduction to Digimon, if anything.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, basically. It was an intro to the movie for those who are unfamiliar with Digimon, and it was an intro to the story of the Digi-Destined.
It's also a good advertisement for whistles.
Yeah, true that. The second part of the movie I thought was the most entertaining part. Like, the movie peaked with this second part, with the virus returning, coming back, and the internet starting to go haywire. I thought that was really interesting. It was an interesting way to start off the movie. And Tai is trying to apologize to Sora and thinks that he accidentally sent an email signing off to Sora with an apology saying "Love Tai," which makes him freak out a little bit, you know? And if you follow the anime, it's always hinted that the two of them like each other, But if the ending of Digimon Season 2 is canon, that means that Matt is actually the one to marry Sora, not Tai. And I honestly don't know how I ever really felt about that.
Probably a case of Ty was just always still very immature, and Matt is more the mature one. She probably wanted to get someone more on her level.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just, I don't know if she ever showed that she liked Matt in that way throughout the anime, but maybe they did after the anime was over. I don't know, canon-wise, anyway. Now,
I don't know. Matt seemed to be very low-key a lot of the time.
He did, yeah. I think Matt was one of the most developed and well-written characters of the original Digidestined. And how this movie shaped how the virus shows up and Koromon starts eating up the internet, I will say one of the greatest things about this movie was the sound editing. Like the part of the movie where they go into like the figurative version of the internet, which to me seems like that's like, it's kind of like a dream. It looks like a dream sequence, or like the Digimon characters, how they imagine the internet to be. That's what the actual internet is. And we see Koromon like kind of eating the internet. And the sound editing, the way they make like the destruction sounds, the attack sounds had me very convinced essentially. It reminded me of like late Dragon Ball or early Dragon Ball Z like sound effects, if you guys know what I mean.
I think so. It wasn't another show that I was too big on either, but they do pick some interesting sound effects in some of these cartoons.
Right, yeah. The sound effects of them making their attacks and how the attacks land and how it's affecting the others made it sound like very like real in terms of like this universe and how effective and how powerful the Digimon can be. That's how it was for me anyway.
Did they use the same voices for the Digimon in the movie that they did in the show? Because I'm going to be honest, I kind of thought Greymon was hilarious. Like, he sounded like a guy who was trying, like, way too hard to impress the audience at, like, a WWE match. It's like, Greymon! I'm not knocking it. I just thought that was delightful.
No, yeah, I'm pretty sure most of the original cast from the TV show showed up again for the movie. That's not the same, unfortunately though, for Digimon Adventure 3, which is the latest set of movies. It's not the same case. Some of those characters, both Digimon and humans, have different voice actors. But for the first movie, yes, I'm pretty sure the cast is all the same.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now, if you follow my channel, then you guys will know that I actually still play a really old Digimon game called Digimon World 2 for PS1. I play it on an emulator on my phone, but anyway, Metal Greymon, I will say, I think is one of the most iconic Digimon. Digimon World 1, I think, was the first console Digimon game, and he was on the cover. So if there's ever like a reboot to PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which is basically the PlayStation version of Super Smash Bros., I really think they should include Metal Greymon in it. Like, there should be a Digimon, and he should be the one to be in it.
Ooh, I got a different vote.
Who would that be?
War Greymon!
Oh, yeah.
That was always my favorite one. And then they came out with Black War Greymon. I was like, damn, that's sleek.
Yeah. War Greymon and Black War Greymon, I would say, are two of the most well-designed Digimon like characters and like in the actual like I guess mythology or what have you for Digimon. I think he's one of the most well-designed. I have had War Greymon in the video games. Another great video game I would say that's Digimon is Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. The ending of those games were like Mass Effect 3 level horrible, but the games itself were really, really fun, so I highly recommend that. Going back to our war game, I thought the story was well written, how it was during the summertime, I think, so all these kids were scattered about. Another part that was really humorous to me, and I didn't pick this up when I was watching the movie for the first time as a kid, how Ty's mom has such crazy recipes for like things she makes. She made this beef jerky shake. What? A beef jerky shake? Then she talked about potato juice and then spinach cookies. Like, what?
Yo, but Izzy was munching on them though. He's getting them some liver sticks and everything.
Yeah, but then he suffered a pretty bad consequence.
Yeah.
I've never baked with flour before.
Oh god.
I just remember, yeah, when I was a kid and I was watching that, and Izzy was like looking like he was about to like collapse, and he just stumbled over to the bathroom, and my mom like saw that scene and she was like, "Oh, he just really needs to go poop, right?" I'm like, "What?" And I just didn't pick up that the movie was making a like joke about how bad Ty's mom's recipes were or are.
You can throw the whole mom away on that one.
As far as the villain, right? They mention how it would have been interesting to see how the Digimon, Koromon, who later becomes Infamon, who later becomes Diaboromon, how this Digimon would have developed if the virus never attacked him. But I really like how the Digimon itself really acted like an insect. Like Infamon, the way he was moving, the way it sounded, it really acted like an actual, like, I guess, virus. Like, wouldn't we all love for the virus to go away, right? But he really sounded like one, like menacing in that way. And sometimes as Diaboromon, sometimes when he would attack, he would like stop periodically. Like when he interrupted Patamon from digivolving, he just stopped there with his mouth wide open.
That's another thing that kind of stuck with me too. Like you see later Kokomon at his final form, once they get the virus out of him, they show what he would look like in that final form. But then he comes back, like he's reincarnated, another Digi-Egg, and then his second form, I think that's his second form, it's still about the same. That confused me.
Yes, so the Digimon that you're talking about, who Kokomon digivolves to, well, Lopmon. Lopmon is the rookie form, Kokomon is the in-training form. And the Digimon we see most of the time is his champion form, which is Wendigomon. Wendigomon digivolves into Antilamon, who then digivolves to Cherubimon, the evil version in the movie. The Digimon type, it's actually an angel Digimon, both the virus versions and the vaccine version, which is what he eventually turns into once the virus is destroyed. They're both angel type Digimon. Now, I will say for the third segment of this movie, which is part of... I just didn't really like the third segment, honestly. Part of the reason why is because they just made so much focus on this character, Willis. Now, not that there's anything wrong with introducing a new character, but they introduce him without much time, and they already make him seem like he's just as important as the rest of the Digidestin. Now, maybe in this universe he's just as important, but for me, someone who is already so attached to the given characters, other than Davis, I kind of hate Davis, but for me, viewing the movie, like as a viewer, as part of the audience, I just wasn't attached to Willis like I was for the rest of the characters, if you guys know what I mean.
Yeah, I'll admit the third act was probably the weakest in my opinion. That second movie, I feel like would have been especially terrifying in 2000 when it came out because everybody was scared about like Y2K bugs, and here's a movie with like a literal virus like terrorizing everybody. But yeah, part 3 was just okay. At least it gave us Smash Mouth, though. Like, come on, you got Rockstar at the end of the movie. You're in good hands there.
True. Honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if more people felt that way about the entire cast of people, like Davis and everything, because they're not introduced in the beginning of the movie. So it's as a person who's newly watching the movie, I feel like it would be harder to attach to those characters.
Oh, definitely. Like, I hadn't watched the series at all, like I said, so, yeah, I didn't really connect with these guys as well as I probably would have if I'd been a viewer of the show. Maybe the arcs make more sense in, like, the context of the series, but then again, perhaps the movie wasn't meant to be seen in isolation, you know?
Yeah.
That is a good point, JM, and I will say, I'm a big fan of Digimon, period. So for me, these movies were very entertaining. But I don't know if these movies and Digimon in general, well, Digimon in general, I guess, is big enough. But I don't know if these movies and the way they were edited had enough to be like a theatrical appeal for like a wider audience. The budget was about 5 million, and they did make a profit. This was 16 million that they made overall, but I feel like maybe they were aiming like a little bit higher. They were aiming for something more, or I guess adding to the audience, or I guess adding to the popularity of Digimon. Which I don't know if this movie was really able to do that. And this was the only Digimon movie that was theatrical, whereas Pokemon had at least one other installment besides Pokemon, the first movie. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the second segment of the movie. I thought it was really cool how they showed the first DNA Digivolution with War Greymon and Metal Garurumon to create Omnimon. And it was interesting to me, or I guess kind of ironic to me, how Izzy was saying if we destroy the original Diaboromon, then all the rest of the Diaboromon will be destroyed. But Omnimon goes ahead and blasts all of the copies first and then goes after the original. So it doesn't even matter if the original was killed first because he destroyed all the copies anyway.
I think didn't he make that? I think he made that statement before they even fused, though, right?
Yes, he made that statement before they fused, but then after they fused, they just went ahead to destroy all of the copies instead of trying to locate the original. And that didn't really matter to me because that part of the movie was epic. I would say the part that was really, like, I guess, foreboding was when Metal Garurumon and War Greymon show up to the internet for their second time against Diaboromon, and the entire internet is like dark now. And the reason it's dark is because it's covered with Diaboromons. Like Izzy said, there was 1 million of them. And I thought that looked epic for what they were going for. I thought that was, it was almost like Star Wars level of epic to me. That's the vibe that it gave me when I saw that scene the first time. And I think Izzy was pretty clever for sending all the emails over to Diaboromon to slow him down. It was interesting how this movie was incorporating how actual like electronics work sometimes. Like the way War Greymon and Metal Garurumon were slowing down, it was because of DOS, like unintentional DOS, which is denial of service, which is what in the real world makes like actual services slow down sometimes. And when Diaboromon was duplicating himself, he was creating what you call a fork bomb in computing, which is another form of denial of service attack. I just thought that was cool. I just thought it was really cool how they were incorporating how real world like digital electronics work and incorporating that into like the digital world. Now,
I gotta give big props to Izzy because aside from Ty, Matt, and their Digimon, he was really the only effective person there. Like they sent Tentomon and Patamon in to help fight, but they didn't even get to Digivolve. They were just knocked out of the fight instantly.
100%. Even in the anime sometimes, Ty will let Izzy make the decisions. Even though Ty is the leader, he trusts Izzy so much for his intellect that he'll let Izzy be the one to choose what the whole team, the whole Digidestined, should do next. Ty put his faith in Izzy, and it ended up being the right thing to do. Now, as far as the third segment goes, so it seems like we all are in agreement that the third act was the weakest. Or Realms, what do you think? Out of the three, which one would you see was the best, and which one was like the weakest?
Definitely, the third was the weakest, and the second was the best. And I say the third is the weakest over the first part is because the first part introduces everybody and leads into the second part, essentially.
Got it, yeah. So the second segment actually has a direct sequel where Diaboromon returns, and I think that would have been a better like third part of this Digimon movie, but I don't know if it came out in Japan yet by that time. That was when Omnimon was not even powerful enough because Diaboromon had Digivolved. So Omnimon and Imperialdramon DNA Digivolved to become Imperialdramon Paladinmon. But that's a whole nother story. It's a whole separate story. We're here to only talk about Digimon the movie. Now, the first thing that I will complain about with this, like I don't have much to say about it to begin with because I just wasn't a big fan of the last part. There were scenes where they were in New York City. TK and Kari were in New York City. That's when they come across Willis for the first time. But how is that entire block? How is it empty? Again, just like the complaints I had with the first segment, like the first 20 minutes. For this third movie, the entire block in New York City is empty and nobody is hearing the noise that this Digimon is making. That really didn't make sense to me. Wendigomon, they never say the Digimon's name. They just always refer to him as Kokomon. But that champion level Digimon name is Wendigomon. Then when they're on their way to Colorado, well, even before they go to Colorado, Willis says they need transport. But the next time we see Willis, he's like walking on a road on his way to Colorado. So how far did he get by like public transportation before he had to start walking? That I didn't really get. And then Wendigomon digivolves to Antilamon, but Antilamon doesn't really do anything. He only digivolves to Antilamon to then digivolve into Cherubimon, who was the final villain of the movie with the virus. So I would have liked to see a little bit more ultimate Digimon level action. We didn't really get that. And now my biggest complaint, and I don't know if you gentlemen will agree, is that we see Angemon and Angelmon show up to save the Digidestin that are currently fighting Cherubimon, but we hear the two angel Digimon say that they need to unlock the golden Digi-Eggs, I think, is what Angemon says. And then Angemon proceeds to warp Digivolve to Seraphimon. When I saw this for the first time, I'm like, wait a minute, since when can Angemon willingly warp Digivolve to Seraphimon? Why did he never ever do this before, like in the anime? In the anime, it's only Agumon and Gabumon who can warp Digivolve. You never see Angemon do it, and on top of that, we know Angemon is quite a strong Digimon for a champion. He was able to take on Myotismon for a little bit. He was even able to take on Piedmon, which was one of the Dark Masters in the first season. Obviously, he lost because he can't keep up with a Mega for that long, but just going off of that, we know that he's very powerful. So I wanted to see Seraphimon and Magnadramon versus Cherubimon. I don't think there was even a need to unlock the golden Digi-Eggs.
They probably didn't need to do that. I think they just wanted to kind of show off more of, Vmon's higher level and what was the other Digimon's name? I forget.
Terriermon.
Okay. Yeah, I think they just kind of wanted to just show that off on a big platform.
It's ironic that that was what they were going for, because right after that, Gatomon says, "Is that the coolest thing you've ever seen or what?" And if she could hear me, I would have been like, no, the coolest thing was seeing you and Angemon digivolve to Seraphimon and Magnadramon, respectively. Those were mega-level Digimon. I think that would have been a much more interesting fight than seeing Magnamon and Rapidmon get swallowed by Cherubimon to then destroy the virus. But that's just me. Like, we only saw them as mega Digimon just to unlock those golden Digi-Eggs, but I would have liked to have seen more action there. That's my primary complaint, to be completely honest. I guess those are my general thoughts about this movie. I did definitely enjoy it. It was great getting to go back and see it again. Stripped down memory lane with all the nostalgia was great. So great choice, Rams. I appreciate you picking Digimon for the first anime episode of this podcast. Do you gentlemen have other closing thoughts or statements?
Yeah, but we can get into those when we go to the rating segment, I guess.
Got it. Okay. Well, with that being said, going into ratings, I know this is basically technically 3 different stories in one, even though they try to connect all 3 stories at the same time. I'm going to try to judge it for what it is as one complete narrative. So I'll give Digimon the Movie a solid 6 out of 10. I really liked the sound editing, and I remember that the song One Week, when it came on during the second segment, I remember hearing that song on the soundtrack the first time around, and I really liked that song, and hearing it again just reminded me of how like I enjoyed it hearing it during the soundtrack there. Animation wise, I feel like the characters in the Digimon, their animation was okay. I mean, the Digimon looked better than the characters sometimes, but the rest of the stuff, like the background and everything, looked fantastic in terms of the actual animation. But the characters, I feel like the budget wasn't as high for like what we saw for Dragon Ball Super Broly. Like the animation there, I feel like was top notch. And the anime, I don't really watch Dragon Ball Super, the anime, but it looks too clean to me. I really loved how, or at least like the method that they used for Dragon Ball Super. So yeah, that's it for me. 6 out of 10.
I could agree with a 6. Like, I feel younger me when I first watched it, we probably put it maybe at a 8 or 9 at the time. But looking back on it now, there were, a few things that I didn't really like.
Same.
Like that last portion of the movie. Going back to what you were saying when we first started, and you said you were looking at it in the perspective of how you viewed it when you were younger, and if it's more catered to kids and adults. For me, I felt like in the third portion, it really reminded me of like more catered to kids type stuff. When they were fighting him and they're saying, "What does he want? What does he want?" And he's saying, "Destroy, destroy." And they get swallowed by him and they're like, "What does he want? He's trying to tell us something. What does he want?" It's like, I felt the answer was obvious. He wants you to destroy
destroy the virus. Yeah.
So stuff like that kind of bothered me. I guess I'll leave it at that. But there's other things that I could nitpick at it.
To be honest, there are other things that I could nitpick too that would just, I guess, make more discrepancies with my score. But yeah, 6 is still a solid score, Rams.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we actually got a consensus this time because I was going to give it a 6 too. So there we go. We've got a hat trick. I will be honest, I did not understand a lot of what was going on. Probably again because I didn't watch the show. Some of the dialogue was nice and snappy, and I appreciated that. Like, you've got to throw some jokes in for the adults that go to see these movies with their kids. And I liked the soundtrack. Like, this was a great late 90s, early aughts mixtape. Particularly when the monsters started dancing along. That was fun. But, yeah, again, I feel like I probably would have liked this one more if I had more knowledge of the source material to build on. But for what it is, it's not bad.
Agreed. And yeah, I agree with you about the soundtrack as well. I remember I was hyped when Wendigomon was like dancing along to Smash Mouth All-Star, but eventually in that decade another movie came out that had that song in the soundtrack, which was Shrek, and that song ended up becoming like more of a Shrek identified song than Digimon.
Oh, it was in a bunch of movies. I think they played it in Rat Race too.
Yeah, it probably was. It was one of the biggest songs, I would say, of that decade as well. But yeah, I also really liked 1 Week from the soundtrack.
Yeah. Like Kids in America and like some of the other songs that made the cut.
Yes. Kids in America. I remember I would listen to that song over and over. Okay, so we do have a hat trick, but I just hope we're not in any jeopardy for having our hat trick be 666, if you know what I mean.
Oh crap! I didn't think of that.
Damn, I'm gonna give the soundtrack an 8 though.
There we go. Yeah, I'll be with you there. Yeah, give the soundtrack like an 8 or a 9. But yeah, Jurassic Mark, you were the one to cap off scoring for this episode, and next episode is all yours.
All right. Well, last time I went with an old school sci-fi movie, so this time I'm going to pick a new-ish comedy. It's called Hail Caesar. It came out in 2016. It's by the Coen brothers, who did a lot of other like pretty well-known comedies. Like I think The Big Lebowski and Fargo were two of their other big hits. But yeah, this one's on Netflix. It's got George Clooney, and it's a pretty fun send-up of old Hollywood, in my opinion. So, looking forward to this.
Alright.
I feel like, yeah, I haven't seen that one. So, yeah, I always enjoy, like, when I get to watch a movie to talk about later that I just have never seen before. So, yeah, definitely interested to check this one out. And I like George Clooney. The last movie, sad to say, that I think that I've seen with him that was a new one was Gravity back in, I think, 2013.
Oh,
that
with Sandra Bullock.
Yeah. But he's a good actor, so yeah, this should be good. So thank you, JM.
He was Batman.
And he was Batman, yeah. Well.
Oh, and just a heads up, on my next anime suggestion, it's going to be more of like a movie-length compilation of a beginning of a series. That way it's more, you don't need to know previous information about it. You're going to know exactly what we know on the next one.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I'm already kind of enticed on what you got on the pipeline rounds for the next few. But yeah,
You shall see.
that just about does it for this episode of Movie Guys Improvise. You are listening to
Chill with Realms.
Jurassic Mark.
and Faerhad Targaryen. Thank you all so much for tuning in with us, and catch us again next week.
Chill energy only.
Bum bum.